Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling Beyond the Pulpit with the Good News Gang. I am your host, Pastor Matt West from Marble Memorial United Methodist Church in Milan. I'm joined this week by Pastor Curtis Clark from Marysville, UMC, and Pastor Kim Metzer from Hope and Welcome Corners, UMC in Hastings. And we unfortunately are missing Pastor Jackie and Pastor Matt this week. Hopefully they can join us again when we get together next time. But we are here, wrestling fans, to wrestle with another topic. And this could be a doozy. So buckle up. We're about to go for a ride. But before we get started, there's always this nice little softball of an icebreaker question to get the conversation going. So I will ask both of you, what is your favorite way to waste time? And will you look back at some point and regret all that wasted time?
Oh, it's funny because I think last week you and I both talked about how TikTok is like this gigantic time suck. You start watching a few videos, next thing you know, half an hour's gone by. It's like, what have I done?
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
So that for me, that's one. I think another one is just to binge on Netflix, and sometimes it's you need it.
Yeah.
But again, you look back, it's like 3 hours later. It's like, holy cow, I've just wasted an afternoon.
How many episodes of You did we watch last?
Right.
But that's the thing, with like binge watching is you'll sit down and it's like, okay, I'm going to watch 2. That's it.
Right.
2.
Right.
Next thing you know,
Yeah.
You're like halfway through the season or near the end because you're like, all right, one more.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just keep
and
sucking
it's
you
so
in.
easy because they just automatically go right to the next.
Well, right. Yeah.
There's no commercials, and they have the skip the intro, so you're saving time there, and
saving time.
But I mean, it's always one of those things where it's like, okay, I got this. I'm only going to watch one, and then it's like, well, I can't leave with that, because the ending was, so like, I'll watch one more.
Yeah, for me, that's why I don't get on Netflix very often, because I'm prone to do that, and another reason why I haven't joined TikTok. But for me, there's this game on my phone, Wordscapes, and many hours, I'm ashamed to say.
Especially you're working your brain out.
Right. Yeah, that's the excuse I give. That's how I justify it. But
so I have to say, since Curtis brought it up, and we were talking about TikTok and you, have you seen the video of the Fox News clip?
Yes, with Laura Ingraham. Yeah. It's almost like that the old Abbott and Costello who's on first.
So there's another guy on this lady's show talking about You, the show.
Okay.
And she thinks he's talking about her. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, You.
Yeah, I was watching You last
she's
night.
Like, I've never done a show, because they were talking about a vaccine, about measles or something on the show. And he's like, there's he's like, the show You on Netflix. She's like, there's a Laura, whatever her name is, show on Netflix. And he's just like, oh my God. And he's like, I give up. He's like, it's You.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Quite humorous.
Yep.
I probably waste a lot of time on TikTok. But sometimes there are some helpful things, some recipes or what that, we've picked up from TikTok.
You are Pastor Chef. You need your recipe.
Right. Yeah. He's got to come out of retirement. And,
he does.
See if he can whip up something again. But but I guess, in some way it depends on how you look at wasted time per se. And the fact that it's like, well, as pastors, we're always encouraged for self-care.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that might mean we do something silly like watch TikToks or play games on our phones or whatever. So is it really wasted time, or is it just our opportunity to unplug from everything else that we do or have going on? But
yes, both and.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, let's dive into things here. But once again, we're using some questions from Pub Theology. And it says last week, Texas voters overwhelmingly supported a measure barring governments from taking any kind of action that limits religious services, such as the public health orders that shut down houses of worship and businesses early in the COVID-19 pandemic. So Amanda Taylor, executive director for the Baptist Joint Committee, said the measure was overly broad. Sorry. Yes, I can see. I guess I better get some glasses.
You need to play wordscapes.
Yeah. I think I need to go to the eye doctor is what I need to do. Said that the measure was overly broad and unnecessary. She previously told RNS it sends a damaging message that religious people are more concerned about special treatment than they are about the good of their communities. Do you agree more with the stance of the voters or of the concerns raised by Amanda Taylor?
So was that the Texas voters voted on that, or was it like this Texas Senate? Did it say voters?
It just says voters. Texas voters overwhelmingly supported a measure barring governments from taking any kind of action that limits religious services, such as the public health orders that shut down
I'd be
houses.
interested to see if the overwhelmingly majority who voted for that actually attend religious services. That's just my initial reaction. I think personally that as religious people, as people of faith, that we need to, one of the foundations of our faith is to love God and to love neighbor. And I think there's times when loving our neighbor means putting the needs of them in the forefront from a health perspective. And so I guess I kind of agree a little bit with what Amanda, was that her name?
Yeah, Amanda Tyler
had said, and its broadness. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would agree with her statement that, it certainly can send a damaging message that, we're seeking, special treatment.
Right.
I mean, there are people that have a lot of issue, with churches already. I mean, take a look at the fact that we're a tax exempt organization and people think that's, bunk.
Right.
But, I'm curious as to your first question about, what's the demographic makeup of these people that voted in Texas, but, certainly tend to side more with Amanda Tyler and the fact that.
And I see her point. I do. But I also see the point of the voters that voted for this. In the whole thing, and I know it was everybody's first time dealing with a pandemic, but I often felt that some restrictions went overboard and lacked nuance and didn't allow organizations of any kind to make their own decisions for their context. So I see that measure as allowing the organizations and people in general to make decisions for themselves based on their context. Should it have been as broad as it was? I don't know. Or maybe it was, I don't know. I think because it specified religious services, that does look bad. I agree with Amanda on that. Is, they're setting themselves up as special. We are special because we're religious, and so you have no say over us. Nah, 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 nah. And is that really showing love to our communities by setting ourselves apart and we can do whatever we want?
Well, I certainly think, especially living here in Michigan, I would agree that there were probably some initial guidelines that seemed a little ridiculous, but at the same time, it's like we went from being one of the best states in terms of controlling the pandemic to now we're the worst.
We are the worst.
But
is that because we were so restrictive early on that people just have no use for anything that comes from higher up now?
I don't know. But it's pretty bad that we were when we didn't have a vaccine, we were one of the best states. And now that we have a vaccine, we're one of the worst.
We are the worst. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, that, I guess, the part about her statement is that we're more concerned about special treatment versus the good of our community, where, as simple a thought as it may be, if we more or less would have just done some of the things, even as simple as wearing a mask or what originally from the get-go or whatever, we might not be still dealing with this in the way that we are, and so it is certainly a fine line to walk in terms of like, okay, you're infringing on my rights, but yet, well, maybe if I just cared for my neighbor enough that we could maybe get through this without as much conflict, that, and the fact that I think we've talked about it before on the show where, somehow we have made this a political issue in the United States, where other countries have addressed it as a health issue and found ways to do it.
Some countries have locked down again.
So.
But sometimes we lose sight of the greater good.
Yes.
And we make it all about the individual, that my rights are being infringed upon because I'm being asked or told to wear a mask, or that I can't, when our buildings were, when we closed, and we made the choice, each of us individually as pastors, as churches, we made the choice at the recommendation and the urging of experts and leadership to stop gathering in person temporarily. And I think sometimes, the religious folks in the church and in whatever religion, we like to, especially here in the West, we like to decry that we're being persecuted because of our faith. And we're simply not experiencing that. Let's just be honest. And we've talked to enough people, we've heard enough stories from other countries where Christianity is banned and where it's illegal, and where people are still meeting in under the cover of darkness, so to speak, and we're not.
Right.
So, but yet I think I wonder too in this being passed, if there were people who felt like they were taking a stand against religious persecution, when in reality we're just not being persecuted because of our faith.
No, we're not at all.
Not the, and also to mention, the fact that somewhere at some point in time, we've developed this culture of don't trust anybody.
Right.
Yep.
We send people to school for years, for, training and whatever area it might be. But it's like, well, even though you have that degree, I don't trust you. Mm-hmm. I don't have a degree in whatever it is you're talking about, but hey, I don't trust you because that just, no.
Well, yeah, because it doesn't fit our personal narrative.
Right. Right. So. Yeah. So similarly, two prominent evangelical seminaries are challenging the Biden administration's vaccine mandate in federal court. Al Mohler, president of Southern Baptist Seminary, says it is unacceptable for the government to force religious institutions to become corrosive extensions of state power. Meanwhile, Vatican City enforces mandates for vaccines and COVID-19 testing. Discuss these contrasting stances by religious institutions.
And I say it goes back to politics. I really do. The polarization of this country is disheartening on so many levels. And I go to a seminary that they mandate vaccines to a point. No, they mandate them. You're not allowed to represent yourself as a student of MTSO if you have not, in a public space, if you have not been vaccinated. So in that, I don't agree with how far that has extended. And if any of the leaders of MTSO see this, you will know that. There's one of my classmate friends that is not allowed to participate in her internship because she is not vaccinated. And And I wonder if I weren't vaccinated, would my appointment as a pastor count as my internship because I'm not vaccinated? And I would say yes, based on the policy they have put in place. So what they are saying is, yes, we're a seminary and we're here to train up leaders in the church, but you are a leader in the church, and because you're not vaccinated, it doesn't count. That just doesn't all connect for me. There's no exceptions, no bending on that at all. And that's another nuance that's lost. So I can totally see, making it mandated to be on campus. Totally get that. That's fine. But beyond the campus, no.
Yeah.
No.
That is a little far reaching, I think.
Yes.
In thinking about the original question, I wonder, and I think we've talked about this either on here, this forum, or maybe just in our private conversations of this particular seminary saying that it's that they shouldn't be doing it. I guess my question is, can they formulate a theological reason why not to? What part of their Christian faith are they using as a explanation for not doing it?
For not getting the vaccine?
For not getting the vaccine, for not, enforcing the mandates, I guess. Whether you're, again, I think we have to approach this when we talk about these institutions like this from a theological perspective. And even, pastor or people who are claiming religious exemptions.
Yeah.
Part of your Christian faith. And I'd be open to hear, I'm not challenging somebody. I would love to hear someone's explanation of what part of your Christian faith, what part of Christ's life, of his ministry, are you referencing when you use a religious exemption to not get vaccinated?
Right. And this student is not using a religious exemption. They've talked to their doctor, and doctor has said,
and that's great.
For whatever reason. Yeah.
But I know people.
But there are people looking for another classmate who is a pastor, had someone approach him asking if he'd write a letter for a religious exemption, and he did not, because they're
right.
One.
Well, this is not an easy topic of discussion. Nope. And my thought is, that I guess I go back to the question before, in terms of, this relates to the seminary relates to this seeking, special treatment, versus the good of the community. And I'm also struggling at a point overall with this whole discussion, because of the fact that I believe that if we would have just done what we needed to from the get-go, there wouldn't need to be a mandate. And obviously people struggle when government steps in, but at some point, when does the government step in to protect the country? And so it's like, okay, we could sit here and argue whether or not the government's hand was actually forced and they needed to do this. But at the same time, when it's like, okay, the vaccine's been released, the vaccine has been approved by, the FDA and backed by the CDC, and yet people still want to argue about it. And it's like, okay, well, we're still having a problem. We are more than a year into this pandemic. And so, at what point does somebody do something about it? So, I think, I look at it from the standpoint that the government's trying to protect our country and hopefully eliminate this, so that we can hopefully get back to whatever it is, life post-pandemic. But because we continue to rebuke the vaccine, and we want special treatment for our group, then we sit here and have the conversation that we're having.
Yeah. And to kind of get back to Kim's point, based on what you just said, Matt, is some people would say, well, the government's trying to take over our country. with these mandates, with these, because we've made it, we've taken it from an issue of, from our perspective of loving our neighbor, to a political issue.
How about the irony in the fact that we as pastors, have leadership in various committees within our churches, and yet the congregation wants to question what the leadership is doing that they elected.
Right.
We elect government officials, and here we are saying, well, yeah, you're supposed to represent us, but we don't want to do what you're saying.
Right.
But they don't. I mean, if it's not someone that you personally voted for, that's where.
Well,
Sure.
Yeah,
that's especially with the presidential situation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it works both sides of that comparison that I made or whatever, and there's going to be that. But, when do we set aside our personal thoughts or beliefs or whatever and try to get on board with what's trying to occur to, for the better of the good, or however that goes?
We know what you're saying. Yeah.
So another person by the name of Brian McLaren says, what we all want is pretty simple, really. What we want to be alive, to feel alive, not just to exist, but to thrive, to live out loud, walk tall, breathe free. When people say I'm spiritual, what they mean, I think, is simple. I'm seeking aliveness. Discuss.
That breathe free line, that's one that people use to not have to wear the masks, especially in relation to their kids. They say, well, we're denying their right to free air by making them wear a mask. That's gone too far. You look at the Asian countries like Japan and even China, especially China, during flu season, they wear masks. This is not a new thing. When we came back from our cruise in 2020 on February 7th, and we had a layover in O'Hare, there were people, mostly Asians, wearing masks because that's what they do. They know how to mitigate the risk. And
I wonder too, like,
why can't we?
Yeah. Oh no, I get it. And I was going to say,
free air.
Would people be okay if surgeons weren't wearing masks while they were performing the surgery on them?
Right.
Hey, I want to breathe free. But it all seems to be like these quotes and this discussion all seem to revolve around this idea of whether or not, the religious sect of society is seeking special treatment, and we're using our religious status to claim that freedom. It's like, well, I'm spiritual. Well, I am too, but I'm not running around going, let me breathe free,
because it's all about me. It's all about me.
Right. And as if we don't have enough issues in the church, to then throw this into the pile too, it just.
So Rethink Church shared an article today, and it's about decentering ourselves.
Yeah, I read that this morning.
Yeah, one of our friends also posted it.
Yeah.
And I didn't read all of it, but maybe Curtis, did you read all of it? But
I did.
It's about not making worship about us, because it's not about us. If you want to elaborate, because you read it all. But.
Yeah, so it started off with that great quote from Francis Chan, which I was surprised that the United Methodist article started off with a quote from.
I know, right?
That the joke is that Francis Chan comes out of worship and someone says to him, I didn't really care for worship today. And he says, well, that's great because we weren't worshiping you. And it kind of goes on from there that we've turned church and worship into a consumer-driven entity and that's sometimes as pastors we try and feel like we have to please everybody, but in essence we have to please the Lord. And as disciples, we're there to please the Lord, not to have our needs met, but to meet God and to interact with God. And through worship, that it's not about our personal preferences, it's about coming back to the authenticity and the truth of worship, of having an interaction and connecting with God. And it kind of went into too, as Methodists, there's always been some conversation around, why don't we have altar calls and things like that? And the author kind of made the point that we do when we come to the table of the Eucharist. We are professing Christ as Savior and seeking an interaction with Christ at that table, whether it's weekly, once a month, whatever it might be. So, but it's just this idea that we again have become so consumer driven in everything we do that we want to be able to and we've all, I'm sure, experienced people in our communities of faith, in our churches, who have left because they feel like their needs weren't getting met, or because they chose to go to the worship world where it was more about them than it was about God.
So I'm looking at this discussion point we've been talking about here, and I guess I'm just, the more I look at it, I'm bothered by this I'm seeking aliveness. If that doesn't scream privilege, I don't know what does. Because, if you truly are spiritual and you were to look in Scripture and the things that, people went through in the Bible, like, you're trying to compare that, to say, Moses trying to, free God's people, out of Egypt, like, to me, it just exudes like,
But it's the same. I mean, when Moses was up on the mountain getting the tablets from God, or talking to God, the people are down below freaking out because they want what they want, and they had Aaron melted down all their gold and made their God to worship to, and we do the same thing today. I mean, people just, they want what they want, and they're not willing to wait.
Right. Oh yeah, we are a very impatient society.
You need to be Moses and come down and throw tablets and
well, because we keep making everything more convenient.
Yes.
The easy button.
Yeah.
One click, and so we continue to do that, and hence enhances the impatientness,
I'm not exempting myself from that. I get frustrated.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, or something new comes out and it's like, well, instead of waiting till the store opens, I'm going to go stand, 24 hours out in front of the store and sleep overnight while I wait for this new product.
Right.
Yeah, I get it. It's just, I guess, like I say, for somebody to be like, okay, because I want to be free to breathe, or, I want to live out loud or whatever. It's like, I'm just seeking aliveness. It's like, there are people that have way worse struggles than that in their life. And for you to act as if that should take priority. I mean, considering we have homeless people, we have people that go hungry every day, we have people that are trying to make ends meet or what, and your big issue is well, I have to wear a mask.
Right. There's people just seeking survival every day.
Right. I mean,
yes.
Just, yes. All right. Well, hey, we're towards the end of our conversation, or at least discussion points offered by Pub Theology. And the last one here for this week says 8 people were killed and dozens more injured at a concert in Houston recently as a crowd surged towards the stage. The concert was part of the Astro World Music Festival, a 2-day event that began on Friday. on a Friday, and about 50,000 people were assembled there on that Friday. And when the catastrophe occurred, have you ever been afraid or left endangered in a crowd setting like that?
No, but interestingly enough, I was reading a newspaper article this morning, an investigative article from MLive on the Faster Horses Festival that is held here in Michigan, in Brooklyn at the Speedway. And I always knew that it was a lot of debauchery and a lot of drinking and a lot of craziness, but the extent that it is was mind-boggling. And they get about 40,000 people at Faster Horses, so similar in size to Astroworld. And our kids have gone to that festival, and I am just thankful that they're still with us, for one thing. But wow, I don't think I've ever felt afraid or endangered in any kind of crowd setting. The biggest concert event, multi-day event I've gone to is Ichthus, and generally don't find that at Ichthus.
Right.
But it's just crazy to me that I don't know, that it all comes down to alcohol a lot of times. So, and every person for themselves mentality.
Yeah.
So the people that died, I think they died because they were crushed.
Right.
And so it becomes that mob mentality and just looking out for number one and not looking at the person you're stepping on as you're going forward. And that's what all of this conversation comes down to, is who are we stepping on to get to our personal rights,
right?
Or what we feel are our personal rights.
What are we doing in our collective actions, and how is it influencing and impacting other people?
Yes.
Whether it's, in a crowd like this. And I've been to, dozens and dozens of concerts, large and small, from the Silver Dome down to, a small intimate setting. And, there were times at the Silver Dome where I was on the main floor and there was never this rush, because I'm old enough to remember, and I think you guys are too, the Who concert in Cincinnati, when there was a general admission rush and people were trampled. I think it's mentioned in that question.
Yeah. It is.
And
Yep.
That's when they stopped doing those type of general admission rushes, was after that. I remember being down at the fireworks in downtown Detroit when I was a teenager, and there was a disturbance, and a group of people came running through where we were seated, and it was almost like a stampede of people, and that was kind of scary, and it stopped me from going down there. I'm not one who really likes large crowds anyways, just for a number of reasons, but I've never felt unsafe. But I think, like Kim, like you just said, this whole conversation has been revolving around how our actions can impact negatively on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, I think I read just this week too that one more person has died since that incident. And I think
a young person, like 9 years old.
Yeah. Which is just sad that, you take a young person or an individual who goes to an event like this for entertainment purposes and ends up dying. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Right.
And I know at the Faster Horses Festival, I think there was an outbreak of COVID after that this year too, I think. Or it was some music festival in Michigan this summer. They were able to trace back.
I think it was Faster Horses. Well, and then the young men that died there.
Yes.
Carbon monoxide.
You're right.
But yeah, it all becomes about number one, and just reading some of the things that happen there, and it's just debauchery.
Yeah, it goes against our teachings of faith, that it's not about us.
Right.
Yeah. It's not just about me.
Yeah.
And my life. It's collectively, again, about the things that we're doing, the things that we're saying, of how it impacts and influences and the lives of other people.
Right.
And, so when we make the choice as an individual to, to not wear a mask, to not get vaccinated, and it's impacting other people.
Yes, it is. And the article, one of the main focuses was on the number of sexual assaults.
Yeah.
And it did say in there at one point, we need to not focus on the victim and the victim's acts, drinking or dressing however they do. We need to, why is this being perpetrated on them? And it's on the perpetrator.
Absolutely.
Going for what they want in the scenario and not taking into account their victim, what they may or may not want.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been afraid, but I certainly have been in some situations where it's like it certainly could have turned ugly. I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know if any of you remember, but the tube from Joe Louis to the parking ramp or what, like it's like trying to squeeze sausage into a encasing, where it's like there's so many people that if somebody lost their mind or something happened,
right.
Could have definitely been in that situation where I could have got trampled. So I mean, I've been in a couple of those situations, but more so as afraid. I'm probably more annoyed. Like,
it's fine.
Get out of the way so I can get through here.
Right.
Well, just being female in general. We talked about this in one of my classes yesterday because the class is for females. The instructor is male, and then a guy auditing the class, a dude. But he's I don't know. We were talking about fear and situations. He's like, Rob and I can walk pretty much anywhere and not have to be afraid. But as a female, I have. I've been an idiot female and had no fear. I don't know, maybe not an idiot, but maybe more confident than I should have been in some scenarios. But why shouldn't I be confident to be able to walk across
campus or parking lot? Or,
I should expect that. I should expect to be safe in any environment. And it's because people looking out only for themselves that I'm not.
Well, and I mean, there's been those situations where I've come out of a concert or a game or something, and the crowd's rather loud trying to get out, where I've just, I've told my wife, I'm like, grab onto my shirt.
Right.
One, so that I know I'm there, because so easily, if she's not connected to me, somebody would cut her off. And then all of a sudden she's like 20 people behind me. Yeah. And I'm looking for her and worried and concerned. So it's like a lot of times, I used to play fullback in high school, so I'm like, grab onto my shirt and let's go, and I just make my way through, because as a male, I can more or less do that. If it was my wife, somebody's going to be like, I don't think so. And cut her off or push her out of the way or whatever, more than likely. But at least then, for me, that's what I guess, in some of those situations I'm more afraid of is for my loved one than I am for myself, where it's like, okay, I'm in protector mode, like grab on, we're going,
And that's why we mask up when we should and got our vaccines, because we are concerned about our loved ones.
And I will say, I want to take a moment, not that, I don't know if he watches us or not, but, I definitely appreciate our bishop, David Bard, here in the Michigan Conference of the United Methodist Church, because, I think he learned along the way in terms of, like, I know initially things happened, he kind of took that stricter approach to all of our churches, and then, took a step back and acknowledged that obviously we're all in different, situations, and, everything's different from community to community, to allow us that, he certainly offered his suggestions, but also gave us the freedom to make our decision based on what he was suggesting. So, I mean, I do appreciate that.
Yes, I do
certainly, the encouragement to, if you're not vaccinated, to get vaccinated. If you're vaccinated and haven't gotten a booster, get your booster, and just continuing to, keep an eye on things, so,
it's all about loving our neighbors.
Yeah. I mean, we're continuing to mask and worship at Marble just because the numbers for Washtenaw County are still high.
Well, everywhere in Michigan.
Well,
we
yeah.
highly recommend, but don't mandate. But it comes down to not even COVID. I started getting the flu vaccine again. Just, I hadn't for years and years and years, and I don't come down with the flu. I don't get the flu, but I serve a very vulnerable population, and I didn't want to take the chance of a weird strain coming out and I infect my entire congregation. So it's not even
right
COVID as much as the annual flu shot.
Well, my concern from the get-go has always been, what if I was asymptomatic? Right. I might be fortunate enough to never get it.
I'm still not convinced that I haven't had a mild case, because I'm generally one that doesn't get sick. So,
but I would feel absolutely terrible if I was to cause another person's death, unknowingly or willingly, however you want to look at it or what. But it's like, because of our position and being around people, especially those that are more vulnerable and I would feel terrible if I didn't do what I could to protect them.
Right.
And potentially put them at risk and maybe even cause their death, so it's like, I'm certainly trying to look out for my neighbor. I don't think it's that much to ask that everybody else do it too, but not in America. Well, my friends, it has been an interesting conversation, and we're certainly curious to see those who are watching what your thoughts are. So don't forget, you can watch Wrestling Beyond the Pulpit on each of our church's Facebook pages. You can also catch us on our YouTube channel, which we would love more subscribers to. But feel free to comment when you watch this episode and share some of your thoughts. Certainly interested to see where people feel the church falls in this conversation, and does it give us the go ahead to seek, I don't know, I'll say special privilege or exemption, or if it's something that we need to do our part, like we're asking everybody else in society to do, so that hopefully we can get through this pandemic sooner rather than later. It's certainly kind of concerning in the fact that, yes, we've returned to some way of life, but numbers are still going up. So yeah, will we see the end of this? Hopefully. That would be nice. Continue to pray.
Yep.
Well, before we say goodbye, any final thoughts from Pastor Kim and Pastor Curtis before we say goodbye?
Just look for extraordinary ways to love your neighbor.
Oh, good one. Yeah.
Especially in the season of Thanksgiving.
Love God, love others, the end.
Amen.
Right on.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us for another episode of Wrestling Beyond the Pulpit with the Good News Gang. We hope you've enjoyed this discussion, and you'll join us again next time. But until then, peace be with you.